The barracks buzzed with the usual blend of nervous energy and overconfidence. It was inspection day, and nobody liked it. Recruits scrambled to make beds tight enough to bounce coins and aligned boots like miniature soldiers standing at attention. Sergeant Collins, infamous for his unblinking stare and brutal honesty, paced outside the rows of bunk beds, barking orders, "Strip to your undershirts. We're checking for unauthorized gear, body tech, wires, anything that doesn't belong." A collective groan rippled through the room. Recruits obeyed, removing their camo jackets one by one. Most didn't care. Some flexed. A few whispered jokes about who would be the first to get chewed out. Then it happened. Private Avery Lane stood still at the end of the line, hands not moving. "What's the holdup, Private?" Collins snapped, stepping toward her. Pavery's expression didn't shift. She stood tall, quiet. Her dark eyes scanned the floor, the wall, then finally the sergeant. "Permission to remain dressed." "Sir," she said, her voice calm. The barracks went silent, then erupted into snickers. "Oh, we've got a shy one." Someone muttered, "Maybe she's got Hello Kitty on her bra." Another added, laughing louder. Even Collins smirked. "This ain't a spa, Lane. You want to be here. You follow orders like everyone else." Without another word, Avery reached up and unzipped her jacket. The moment it slid off her shoulders, the laughter died. Every eye turned toward her chest, not out of disrespect, but confusion. Where other recruits wore regulation-issue undershirts, Avery's shirt was thinner, and through it, a dark tattoo showed faintly beneath the fabric. Black ink, geometric shapes, a matrix of numbers and cryptic symbols sprawled across her collarbone and down over her heart. Nothing decorative. It looked technical. "What the hell is that?" muttered one recruit. Collins stepped forward. His amusement vanished. "Take a step forward, Private Lane," he ordered. She obeyed, standing silently under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Lift the shirt. I need to see this clearly." Avery hesitated, then slowly pulled her undershirt up, just enough to expose the tattoo fully. The room stood in stunned silence. The shapes weren't artistic. They were deliberate, military, even. A sequence of hexes, triangles, and serial numbers wrapped in a pattern known only to those familiar with encryption protocols. One of the recruits, a former cybersecurity major, whispered under his breath, "That looks like part of an old Dodd cipher ... Collins' face went pale. His training kicked in, and he backed away from her slowly. He grabbed the walkie on his hip and spoke low but firm. "Command, this is Sergeant Collins at Barrack 3. I need an immediate protocol check. Possible breach or asset." "What's going on?" whispered someone from the back. Another replied, "Dude, I think that tattoo is classified." Within minutes, the base locked down. A military jeep arrived, followed by a black SUV with no insignias. Men in plain suits and one woman in a Navy uniform stepped out. Nobody said a word. Avery was asked to step outside. She didn't argue. As she passed the row of stunned recruits, no one laughed now. Not even a breath. For the first time in her life, Avery Lane wasn't hiding. She had just revealed a part of herself no one was ever supposed to see. And it changed everything. Asterisk, the moment Avery Lane stepped outside, the tone of the bass shifted. The usual rhythm boots hitting concrete, orders shouted from across yards, laughter from the mess hall disappeared. The only sound was the low hum of the black SUV's engine and the soft wind threading through the wire fences. Inside the SUV sat two men in dark suits and a woman in a Navy uniform with a single star on her shoulder rear, Admiral Lynn Harker. She didn't speak as Avery approached. She simply opened the rear door and nodded. Avery got in without hesitation, her expression unchanged. The door shut behind her, and the vehicle pulled away. Back in the barracks, Sergeant Collins remained. Still, eyes fixed on the exit, like he'd just seen a ghost. One of the recruits, Private James Wells, the same one who had mocked her, whispered, "What the hell was that about?" Another recruit, Pete Donnelly, pulled out his phone under the bunk. "I got a photo," he whispered. Collins spun so fast, his boots squealed against the concrete. "Put that away right now, or you'll wish you were never born." Wells swallowed hard. "She's not just a recruit, is she?" Collins didn't answer. Instead, he left the barracks and made a call. Inside the SUV, Avery sat calmly, hands on her knees, eyes focused on the passing fence posts. "You shouldn't have shown it," Admiral Harker said quietly, her voice measured. "I didn't volunteer," Avery replied. "Still, that tattoo is not only dangerous, it's classified beyond top secret. Technically, it doesn't even exist." Avery turned her head slightly. "Then we're both ghosts again." Harker didn't respond right away. She studied Avery's face, searching for signs of deception, fear, or even guilt. There was none. The vehicle turned toward a restricted section of the base, past 2 gates and a guarded checkpoint with blacked-out windows. They stopped in front of a squat concrete building, marked only by a keypad and a scanner. Inside, the temperature dropped by 10 degrees. The walls were lined with screens, filing cabinets, and 3 men in security clearance read. Avery was guided to a long steel table. A projector whirred to life. The lead officer, a graying man named Thomas Kincaid, spoke first. "We matched the tattoo to a cipher used during Operation Echo 9, a Cold War-era protocol meant for black site agents only. We assumed the last of it was destroyed." "It wasn't," Avery said. Kincaid frowned. "Who authorized you to carry it on your body?" "No one. I did it myself." "Why?" "Because we were compromised," she replied, her tone still calm. "The mission failed. Our satellite connection was jammed. Exfil was canceled. I was the only one left." "And your solution was ink?" Harker pressed. "It was the only way to preserve the encryption. Our fallback system required 2 verification codes. I had one. My partner had the other. He didn't make it." The room fell into silence. The code on Avery's chest wasn't decorative. It was survival. Back at the main base, the story had spread like wildfire. "She's CIA." "No, she's a traitor. That's why they took her." "Shut up, idiot." Collins looked like he was about to puke. But Collins wasn't speaking. He was in the command center, watching encrypted alerts arrive from the Pentagon. The message was simple. Priority 1. Hold all imagery per lock communications subject lane. Avery Level 6 authorization required. He leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. He had seen a lot in his years, but this was different. In the briefing room, Admiral Harker stood and walked to Avery. "You just surfaced after years off-grid. Why now?" Avery took a breath. "I didn't come back. I blended in. I needed to be a soldier again. Nothing more." "But you are more," Harker said. Softly, Avery looked at her. "That's what I was afraid of." Inside the dim-lit classified operations chamber, the tension was electric. The kind that crackles under skin, unspoken but unmistakable. Avery Lane sat still at the end of the long steel table, hands folded neatly. She didn't twitch. Didn't blink. She was trained to handle pressure. But this wasn't a combat zone. This was worse. Rear Admiral Harker, now seated directly across from her, activated a secure monitor. A live Pentagon feed flickered onto the screen, with 4 faces appearing, each marked Level 6 clearance. One of the men leaned forward. "Is your name really Avery Lane?" Avery didn't answer right away. "It's the name I was given when I re-entered the system." "You're not in any known military database prior to 2 years ago," another officer said, his voice stern. "No deployment records. No academy trail. Nothing." Avery nodded. That's by design. Harker folded her arms. Then tell us what design. Avery finally exhaled, as if letting go of something old and rusted. I was part of a ghost unit. Signal Intercept 37. We weren't official. We didn't wear uniforms. We didn't get names on plaques. We intercepted unauthorized transmissions state, rogue and extra-governmental on foreign soil. And who authorized this unit? Joint Intelligence Command. It was a joint black-budget program between DOD and the NSA. It was terminated after a failed operation in Eastern Europe. Everyone in the unit was presumed dead. But you're not, said the officer coldly. No, sir, I survived. The room went quiet. Harker pressed further. A tattoo. Explain it. Avery pulled back the collar of her shirt, exposing the numbers and shapes again. This is the fallback cipher for Echo 9. In the event of complete mission compromise and system wipe, our orders were to preserve key data through any means necessary. I couldn't risk carrying a drive. I memorized the code, then tattooed it. You did it yourself? Yes, in a burned-out clinic in Lublin, after my partner was killed. I thought I'd be extracted. Instead, I was ghosted. No exfil. Number. COMS. I became a loose end. You could have gone rogue, Harker said. I could have died, Avery countered. But I chose to disappear. The room once again grew still. While Avery spoke, base communications were silenced under an internal blackout. The barracks were monitored, phones collected, internet blocked. All over one recruit. James Wells, the loudmouth who'd mocked her days ago, now sat on his bunk silent, pale and sweating. I shouldn't have said anything, he murmured to Donnelly, who sat beside him. She's not some recruit. She's like a ghost soldier. She's something bigger, Donnelly whispered. And I think we just watched a legend walk out of here. Collins entered the room, holding a sealed file, and scanned the bunks. You all saw nothing. You will speak nothing. And if a single word about Private Lane leaves this building, Pentagon protocol will apply. That means court-martial, prison, or worse. Understood? They all nodded silently. But curiosity had already rooted itself too deep. Back in the chamber, the call with the Pentagon ended. Admiral Harker leaned forward and softened her tone. Why come back now? I didn't come back, Avery said. I laid low for years, but I needed structure. I needed to feel real again, so I enlisted. Figured if I became someone else long enough, I could forget who I used to be. You were trying to bury it. I thought the uniform would protect me from my past. Harker sat back, eyes locked on her. Instead, it exposed you. Avery gave a small, almost bitter smile. Secrets always find light, ma'am, even if they're inked beneath your skin. Avery rarely dreamed anymore. But the nights following her detainment were filled with flashes burning buildings, coded transmissions, frostbitten fingers pressing old Soviet dials. Ghosts visited her in those dreams, comrades lost in silence. She woke each time before dawn, her jaw tight, sheets soaked in sweat. The past had returned, clawing its way to the surface. After the Pentagon debriefing, she was given temporary quarters in a secure wing of the base. Not quite a prisoner, not quite free. Her door wasn't locked, but two men in plain clothes sat nearby every hour of the day. She didn't resist. That was her secret. She was tired of running. 3 days later, she stood in front of Rear Admiral Harker again. This time in a smaller, private meeting room, with only one other man present, General Marcus Dyer, Joint Command Intelligence Liaison. His face was lined from decades of secrets, his eyes sharp but tired. Miss Lane, he began. Or would. You prefer your former name, Specialist Athena Grady. Avery flinched. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in years. She hadn't heard it since before her final mission in 2018. I stopped being her a long time ago, she said quietly. Dyer nodded. Understood. But let's revisit that mission. She didn't want to, but she owed it to them. And to the ones who never made it home. Operation Black Frost had been a joint-use NATO mission targeting an illegal signal relay site deep in Belarus. The relay was broadcasting ghost frequencies, digital packets buried in static, barely detectable, masked as solar interference. These signals were known to contain operational blueprints, nuclear smuggling routes, and intercepted diplomatic communications. Dangerous things. Avery's 5-person team infiltrated under cover of a snowstorm. One was killed during insertion. Another captured. Their exit window vanished within hours. Inside the relay compound, Avery's partner, Captain Ruiz, extracted. A partial cipher just before an airstrike decimated the building. He shoved the key into her hand and ordered her run. She did. I buried his body in the snow, Avery told them. Used the heat from our radio pack to melt just enough ground. Then I walked south for 3 days. She paused. I knew I couldn't risk capture with the key. I needed the cipher to live in a form no one would suspect. So you chose to tattoo it, Dyer said, more observation than question. Yes, she said, in a back room. Local. Ink, no anesthesia. Took 6 hours. I nearly passed out halfway through. And then? Harker asked. I became someone else. Changed everything. Grew my hair, altered my voice, crossed borders under forged names. Then I disappeared in Texas. The Army's automated system didn't know who I was. I blended into basic. And what was the plan? There was no plan, she said. I just wanted to feel like a human again. A uniform, a mission, even if it was small, it gave me purpose. Harker's gaze softened. You know the Pentagon wants you back. Not as a recruit, as a field asset. Echo 9's protocols were never declassified. Your tattoo makes you a living encryption unit. That makes you invaluable. Avery stiffened. No, I've done enough. But you're the last one. I know. And I'd like to stay that way. That night, Avery sat on her cot, tracing her fingers across the faint outlines on her chest. Each symbol was a memory. Each number, a scream. Each line, a name she had buried. The tattoo wasn't a mark of pride. It was a gravestone. And she wasn't ready to dig it up again. Rumors spread like wildfire. Despite orders from Sergeant Collins and a blackout on all outgoing messages, the story of Avery Lane, or rather, the mystery surrounding her, traveled faster than any classified intel ever had. In the mess hall, recruits exchanged hushed words over trays of powdered eggs and instant coffee. She's not even her real name. She was part of some ghost op. You know, the kind they make movies about. They say the Pentagon sent a jet just for her. No way, she's just a private. Even the instructors, usually tight-lipped and humorless, had gone quiet. Some wore a new look of respect when they mentioned her. Others avoided saying her name at all. James Wells, the recruit who had mocked her the loudest during inspection, sat alone most meals now. He barely ate. The moment she had removed her shirt and revealed the code, something had shifted in him. Guilt had nested inside his chest like a virus. She was a joke to me, he told Donnelly during evening drills. Just another quiet one. I thought, hell, I don't know what I thought. And now, Donnelly gave him a look. Now you realize you laughed at someone who probably saved this country more than we ever will. Meanwhile, in a secure command center, Rear Admiral Harker and General Dyer reviewed options. She won't accept a new mission, Harker said. She wants peace, not purpose. She's too valuable to let go, Dyer replied. That tattoo, it's more than encryption. It's the last remaining access key to Echo 9's final protocol. It opens doors even we don't know about. Harker folded her arms. And what happens when someone else learns about it? She becomes a target. Again, Dyer didn't answer. He already knew she was a target from the moment her undershirt lifted in that inspection room. That night, Harker visited Avery's quarters alone. "You're cleared to return to regular training tomorrow," the Admiral said gently. "We're not pressing charges, and we're not reassigning you. Yet." Avery tilted her head. "You're giving me my life back?" "No, I'm giving you the chance to keep living it on your terms. Until someone higher decides otherwise." "I appreciate the honesty." Harker lingered. "You're a legend now, whether you like it or not. Even the base cooks are whispering about you." "I didn't come here to be a story." Harker smiled faintly. "Nobody who becomes one ever does." She left without waiting for a response. The next morning, Avery walked into the training yard as if nothing had happened. Her uniform was the same, her expression unchanged. But the air around her was different. Where once she had been ignored or mocked, now silence followed her footsteps. Some recruits nodded in respect. Others looked away, unsure how to behave around someone who might have once held the fate of nations beneath her skin. Sergeant Collins called out drills as usual, but his eyes landed on Avery more than once. Not in suspicion, something closer to quiet acknowledgement. She didn't demand reverence. She didn't even want recognition. All she wanted was to finish what she started, to earn her place among them, not as a legend, but as a soldier. That night, a general order was issued. A new intelligence monitoring station was being formed deep in the Arctic Circle, near a classified relay site. Only one name was on the transfer list. Lane Avery, or rather Grady. Athena. The new command post would be off-grid.silent.secure. And thousands of miles from the world that remembered who she used to be. James Wells sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the boots on the floor beneath him. They were clean, laced, regulation perfect. But his mind wasn't on inspections anymore. It had been days since Avery Lane returned to regular training. She moved through drills with machine-like focus, always quiet, always precise. No longer mocked, no longer invisible. She didn't speak to anyone, and no one dared speak to her except for Wells. Or at least he wanted to. But he couldn't figure out how to start. The shame ate at him. He remembered how he laughed, how he nudged Donnelly and whispered jokes, how he rolled his eyes when she hesitated, and then how the room froze when the ink was revealed. He wasn't looking at a joke. He was looking at a woman who had seen more than all of them combined. A woman who carried something so dangerous, so deeply classified, it had changed the atmosphere of the entire base. And he'd laughed. That evening, as the he. Recruits finished chow and filed out of the mess hall. He saw her sitting alone at a table by the far wall. Her tray was mostly untouched. She didn't look up. Wells stood frozen, then took a breath and walked toward her. "Private Lane?" he asked quietly. She looked up slowly. Her eyes didn't show anger or bitterness, just that same unreadable calm. He swallowed hard. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry for laughing, for not treating you with respect." She stared at him for a long second. Then she said, "I heard your apology." He blinked. "Just now?" "No," she said, her tone even. "In your silence." He sat across from her, unsure if he should speak again. She broke the moment by nudging her tray aside and leaning back slightly. "Most people don't realize silence can be louder than words," she said. "I've lived in it for years. You start to hear things most people miss." "I really didn't know who you were," he admitted. "I preferred it that way," she said. "I didn't want to be seen." He dropped his gaze. "I don't blame." You if you hate me. I don't, she said simply. I've been hated before. It never changed anything. But people who feel shame, they're the ones who change. He looked up at her again, this time with something deeper than regret understanding. You're staying long? He asked. No, she said. I've been reassigned. To where? She offered a slight smile. Someplace cold, quiet. He nodded, not pressing further. A long silence passed between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was real, earned. That night, as lights out approached, Avery packed her duffel quietly. The orders had come in earlier that day. She was to leave at 0500. For Arctic Relay Post Sigma 17, a classified deep signal intelligence site on U-controlled territory above the Arctic Circle. It wasn't a punishment. It was an exile. It was a gift. She'd asked for silence. They gave her an ocean of it. As she zipped up her bag, she glanced around the barracks, this strange space where she had tried to be anonymous, then became unforgettable. She paused at the foot of James Wells' bunk. Good luck, Private, she said softly. Wells sat up fast, startled. You too. They didn't shake hands. They didn't salute. They just nodded. That was enough. The next morning, when the other recruits woke up, her bunk was empty. No note. No goodbye. Only a small patch left on the pillow. The signal unit's emblem from Operation Echo 9, stitched in black thread, frayed at the corners. Sergeant. Collins found it an hour later and said, nothing. He just took the patch and locked it in a drawer. Some stories weren't meant for books. Some were meant for silence. At 0500 sharp, a matte gray transport truck pulled up outside the barracks under a sky still painted in pre-dawn blue. No headlights, no markings, no announcements. The driver didn't speak. The engine hummed low, waiting. Private Avery Lane stepped into the chill morning air with a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She wore no insignia, no name tag, just standard fatigues. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel, each step echoing like punctuation in a sentence she didn't want to finish. She didn't glance back at the barracks. She didn't say goodbye. She just climbed into the truck, shut the door behind her, and vanished into the horizon. By the time reveille sounded, her bunk was stripped and perfectly made, pillow fluffed, blanket folded at 90 degrees. No belongings, no gear. Just emptiness and the quiet feeling that someone important had been there, briefly, powerfully, and was now gone. The only thing left behind was a hand-stitched black patch on the pillow, a circle with a ghost-like emblem in the center barely visible. Few understood what it meant. Those who did said nothing. James Wells was the first to notice. He stood at her bunk, arms folded, staring down at the patch. Donnelly joined him moments later. She left without a word. Donnelly said quietly, "She already said everything." Wells replied. For the first time since joining the military, he felt something bigger than himself, something sacred. At HQ, Sergeant Collins stood in front of the base commander's desk, holding the patch in a sealed evidence bag. She didn't violate any protocols, he said. She just disappeared. Colonel Myers didn't look surprised. Her transfer came through classified channels. You won't see her name again. None of us will. Collins hesitated. Is she safe, sir? Myers looked up, a rare softness in his expression. As safe as she's ever been, and probably safer than we are. Then he reached into a drawer and slid a folder across the table. Destroy this after reading. Collins opened it. Inside was a single-page coordinates, designation, Sigma-17 and below it, clearance level, Omega operative name, Grady, Athena, a.k.a. Lane, Avery. Status, active, do not pursue far north. Sky opened into endless gray. Snow blew sideways across a sea of white and ice. The Arctic wind howled, ripping past steel towers and antennae strung across a vast perimeter fence. The outpost looked like something from a science fiction film, half buried in snow, humming, with encrypted transmissions. Inside, the temperature was cold but bearable. Avery walked the narrow corridors alone, her boots echoing against reinforced metal floors. She passed no one. She heard nothing but the steady beep of satellites locking signal. This was silence, the kind she had begged for, the kind that couldn't be taken away. In the control room, a wall of screens flickered quietly, with graphs and bursts of binary. The low signal, believed to be solar noise by most, displayed faint distortions only she recognized. One transmission blipped, almost playful in its rhythm. She leaned forward, fingers brushing the cold surface of the console. Encrypted, fragmented, but familiar. Avery typed in a command 1. Only she still remembered, and the screen stabilized. Echo 9. Speaking again after 7 years. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Back at the base, life moved on. Drills resumed, barracks filled with noise. But her absence lingered like smoke after a fire. Recruits still whispered, "She was one of them. She's not dead, just somewhere colder." And in rare moments of reflection, some remembered her. Not as the girl with the code, but as the woman who never asked for glory, never demanded recognition. She had come and gone like a storm. And sometimes, when the night was quiet, James Wells would catch himself looking out toward the horizon, wondering where she was. Snow fell gently outside the narrow window of Outpost Sigma 17, painting the frozen tundra in soft layers of white. It was the kind of silence that swallowed sound entirely. No traffic, no chatter, not even birds. Just wind and stillness. Avery Lane Athena Grady, to those who knew the truth, sat alone in the command chamber, surrounded by machines that never slept. Banks of monitors pulsed with data, whispering deep space transmissions and radio ghost signals. To the untrained eye, it was nonsense, white noise, and static. But to her, it was a language. One she had once risked her life to protect. And now, it spoke again. The tattoo on her chest no longer ached the way it did during training. The ink had settled. The pain of its origin carved into her, in a foreign city under flickering lights and shivering hands, had dulled into memory. But its meaning hadn't faded. The code was still active, still relevant, still dangerous. And she was still the only person alive who understood all of it. That made her both a gatekeeper and a weapon. From time to time, the signal returned irregular, buried deep in cosmic noise. Not from Earth, not anymore. Something had picked it up. Something was bouncing it back. Avery didn't speculate on what. She didn't get to ask those questions. Her role was clear. Detect, decode, disappear. She filed reports that would only be read by a handful of men and women in windowless rooms thousands of miles away. She never signed them, never asked for acknowledgement. The only person who ever contacted her directly was Admiral Harker, via a secure monthly feed. Harker always kept it short. "Are you safe? Is the code stable? Any activity?" Avery always replied the same. Yes, possibly. In the rare moments she let her mind wander, she thought about the base. The recruits. James Wells. She wondered if he still remembered her, or if she had become just another whispered myth told to new trainees. The ghost soldier. The walking cipher. The woman with the tattoo. It was better that way. Honestly. Legends couldn't be hunted. One night, the Arctic wind screamed against the outpost walls. A power flicker momentarily dimmed the lights. The screens rebooted, and then just for a moment, the signal spiked. It was sharper now, clearer. The code she carried had activated a new sequence, one she didn't recognize. Her fingers moved instinctively, translating, decoding, aligning. Frequencies. It was a ping, not an attack, not a threat. A call. Who or what she didn't know. She stared at the screen long after it faded, her heartbeat steady but alert. Who else had memorized this? Who else was still alive? Or worse, who had found it? Back at Fort Ridgeline, years later, James Wells had risen to staff sergeant. Recruits now laughed at him like he once laughed at her. He corrected them gently, firmly. He still kept a folded patch in his locker, the black one with the ghost emblem. No one ever asked about it twice. Once, during orientation, a new recruit pointed to it and asked, "What's that from?" Wells didn't answer. Instead, he looked out the window for a long moment and simply said, "She saved a lot more than we'll ever understand." Back in the Arctic, Avery zipped up her jacket, pulled her hood tight, and stepped outside. The snow hit her face like tiny needles, but she didn't flinch. Somewhere out there, the code was waking up again, and she was ready, not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as a keeper of a silence so deep, only a few would ever know it existed. She walked toward the relay tower, and the sky blinked back. The end.